Today we are doing a deep dive on the let them theory. Now this has been on the New York Times bestseller list. It sold millions of copies. It went viral on TikTok, and I did not like this book. So in this video today, what I want to do is kind of a summary, summarizing it for those of you that haven't read it, if you haven't listened to the podcast, but also fix some things about it because I've been seeing some people misusing it online, and then it's leading to actually some kind of like toxic relationships. So I want to get into it, do a little deep dive and what I would fix about this book. So hi, I'm Alexis. If we're just meeting, on this channel, we do a lot of deep dives on goal setting and creating your dream life and your best life and lots of personal growth related topics. So in theory, I really should have liked one of the best-selling self-help books. But when self-help gets a bad rap, it is all exemplified in this book. When people say it's all stuff it's common sense, you should already know, it was repetitive, you didn't learn anything new, that is all exemplified in this book. It's covered up with good marketing. So before we get into it, I am back on Instagram, last week of the Potential Planner being on sale, and then I do have hour-long coaching sessions if you are interested in any of that. So the first issue with the let them theory is it was not originally Mel Robbins' work. This was actually a poem that went viral and people got tattoos based on this poem by Cassie Phillips. So I wanted to have the poem here, and honestly, I think that this concept, the let them theory, I think it works better as a poem. It almost just should have stayed a poem because if you've read the poem, if you read the title of the book, I feel like you read the book. So I'm just going to leave this poem here. So if you want to pause it and read it, you can, but I'm going to dive into the book now. So before I dive into it, most of the examples in the book were either for superficial situations or superficial relationships. And in both of those instances, I think it works really well for. But if you are in a long-term relationship and there is a significant issue that isn't a deal breaker, I wish that she would have put more emphasis on you should see a counselor, because it seems like in a lot of the examples in this book, it's either the relationship or the situation is kind of insignificant, so just let it be and let it go. Or it's a really big issue, it's a deal breaker, it's an abusive relationship, and then you should go. And sometimes there is a bit of a gray area where you need to stick it out through the relationship. It's not abusive, it's not dangerous, it's just that we're imperfect people and we have conflicts in relationships. And so if you're in a long-term relationship and there's a significant issue that isn't a deal breaker, or you're not sure if it's a deal breaker, I just wanted to say, like, right off the jump, to see a counselor. I wish that would have been talked about a lot more heavily in the book. So she talked about at the end of the book this analogy that people and situations are like the weather. Sometimes it's cloudy, sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's sunny. And we spend a lot of time just wishing that the weather were different or trying to control the weather when really we have no control over it to begin with. So she said, we spend a lot of time resisting reality, exhausting yourself over wanting people to be better friends, worrying about not having a partner, stressing about your family not supporting you, wanting your boss to recognize your worth, having Groundhog Day conversations, meaning it's just these conversations that go nowhere, you're just having the same conversation over and over again. And so all of that is when our expectations and reality are not lining up and we're resisting reality. But even though we do this to feel a sense of power, we're actually giving our power away, because now on top of there being bad weather, which we cannot control if it's rainy or sunny, we now are stressed on top of it. And us consenting to give our negative emotions to the situation is us consenting to give our power away. So this is where the let them and the let me part of the theory comes in. Now, she talked about at the beginning of the book that this let them and let me theory is basically just Stoicism repackaged. It's some Buddhist principles repackaged. If you ever done AA or had like a family member in AA, I thought of the serenity prayer, which they say in AA a lot. And that's a lot of what this book reminds me of. So a lot of it is just borrowed from other traditions. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And then there's more in the middle, but I just kind of skipped ahead, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life. So I want to dive into it now, the let them and the let me theory, in terms of the serenity prayer, in terms of what principles to use in different types of relationships. So one thing I think this book is really good for is if you're in a relationship that's codependent, you feel like you fix people, you're enmeshed with another person, when they feel sad, you feel sad, and you can't draw the line where their feelings start and where your feelings end. So it's really good for that type of person. But I think the theory on its own advocates for too much independence. So going from codependence to independence might be better, like a hyper independence. But wanting to eventually, like if you're married, to get to a place of interdependence, relationships where you rely on each other, you trust each other, but you're also your own person. So something the book didn't really talk about is, I think the first step, if you're in some sort of relationship conflict, is to respectfully communicate your needs, because you need to determine, is this person willing to be changed or not? Like in the Serenity Prayer, it's the wisdom to know the difference. Is this something that cannot be changed and I got to accept that person as they are and choose what I'm going to do? Or is this something that I actually have impact over and can change? So you're going to respectfully communicate your needs and see, do things change? If things do not change and you're in this kind of Groundhog Day situation where you're having the same conversation over and over and over again, then you've determined this is a situation that is not going to change. This person does not want to change. So if it's been demonstrated that they don't want to change, then you can kind of move on to the let them, let me theory. So the first step is to let them. You're metaphorically in bad weather. And for the first step is just to accept it. It doesn't mean that you condone it per se, but it just means that you understand this is not going to change. You have to come to terms with kind of like the acceptance phase of grieving. It's not that you wanted the thing to happen or that you condone it, but you get to a place where you say, okay, this is reality and I'm accepting that unfortunately this is reality. So it's the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. And so it's to remove enmeshment and lean out. You get a little bit of detachment. If you're in a codependent relationship, you don't know where the other person starts and where you begin. So you need, in the first step, to detach a little bit, to detach yourself from the other person. So don't try to force someone to commit who isn't ready. Let them be non-committal. Don't try to force your family to approve your life choices. Let them disapprove. Don't hold on to potential instead of reality. I think this is another example where the let them theory works really well. If you're at the beginning stages of a relationship, or if you're kind of new in a relationship and you're just seeing their potential and not reality, that's a huge part of the acceptance thing we need to come to terms with. We need to accept how reality is, not what we wish potential was. Basically, don't try to make it sunny when it's cloudy. Let the weather be what it is. Let them show you who they are, and then you get to decide what you want to do with it, which is what we'll get to in the second step. Now, there are some caveats to this, and at the beginning of the book, she lists some situations where you shouldn't do this, or there are some misunderstandings of the theory, which is what I want to talk about first. So she says that these are all examples of what would be an inappropriate application of the theory. So if you're just blaming, if you just stop here and you just are always blaming other people and not getting to the second step where you look at yourself, having a sense of superiority is the same thing. To just stop answering your phone, shrugging your shoulders. If you get this hyper independence, that's an inappropriate use of the theory. Refusing to talk it out, staying in an abusive situation, ignoring discrimination or dangerous behavior, taking it as license to ghost people, avoiding hard conversations, withdrawal, loneliness, letting people cross your boundaries. So it's accepting people as they are, as long as they're not harming themselves or harming others, which is why this theory works the best for superficial situations where you're just being a little too controlling. And it gets a little bit more sticky, I would say, in a long-term relationship. So if you're in a dating phase, or we're talking about friendships, I feel like this works a lot better than this advice works like if you're married, for example. Something that I could see as a red flag or maybe an inappropriate use of this theory is taking this as a sign to just detach, not getting into the second step. Because if you only do the first step, you're just detaching and then you never try to influence anyone. You're just like, oh, well, I guess I'm just hands off. I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm not going to try to engage in deep conversations with things. So it's important that we do get to the second step where you really lean into relationships. And I want to say that you can influence people who want to be and are ready to be influenced. Otherwise, you cannot change people. So my husband, Garrett, and I, we're in a relationship where we're open to influencing each other. We're open to that. He can't force me to change, but because I'm open to being influenced and open to change, then we are changeable in our relationship. And so if you're in a long-term relationship, I would say you want to be in a relationship that's like that, where they're open to change, open to compromises, open to changing for the other person. What doesn't work is when only one person is open to changing and the other person is not. And when that happens, then you're in a relationship dynamic that's not working. And part of this that I was thinking about comes back to natural consequences. As a teacher, this is something that we talked about a lot, natural consequences, where the school would actually tell parents, if your child forgets their lunch at school, just let them. They need to experience the natural consequence of it. Not a natural consequence is something where you just let nature take its course. It's not a consequence that someone has to impose a punishment. Like, okay, you're in timeout now. You need to write a thank you note now. You need to write an apology note now. It's something that's natural, that if the adult stepped in and did nothing, nature would just take its course. People develop resiliency and competency by experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. So by stepping in and fixing things, we're making the person weaker and weaker every time we do that. Now, natural consequences, it always has a limit. Of course, it's similar to let them theory, not when it's dangerous, not when it poses a safety hazard to them or others, not when there's discrimination involved. So you have to pick and choose, with children when you're going to employ natural consequences. But for example, like if I'm rude, I'll have less friends. So you don't need to step in and apologize for someone. If your boyfriend is being really rude to people, don't step in and fix it for him. Don't go to his friends, I'm so sorry he did that. Don't fix things for people. If I break a toy, I'll have less toys to play with. If I do laundry incorrectly, I'll ruin my clothes. And this is how people learn, and it's better, like she gives a lot of parenting examples. I'm not a parent, but she gives examples where it's better that they fail in your home than they're 18, they graduate, they go out of the house, and now they just are for the first time when the stakes are higher learning all these things. You want when the stakes are lower for them to be making more of the mistakes. So let people make mistakes that aren't dangerous. Let people feel their emotions without trying to fix them. Let people express their individuality that's different from your own. So if you're in a relationship with someone, let's say they're just like a jerk and they're really mean to you and they belittle you, they need to learn the natural consequence that if I'm rude to people, I can't get a girlfriend. They need to learn that natural consequence. But when you give people too many chances to walk over you and you're a doormat and you enable their behavior and you're trying to fix them, that ultimately makes them weaker and they're not learning the competency that they need to learn. So that's the first step, is let people be who they are, accept them who they are, not who their potential is. And once you're seeing them as they are, then you get to decide what you do next. And that's why it's really important, this let me portion. That's why it's important to go into this part too. So going back to the serenity prayer, the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can. So it's then taking responsibility. It's having an internal locus of control. That's another thing that is really, it's unstated in this book, but that's a lot of what we're talking about is a locus of control. So instead of feeling like you're at the whim of all these other people or you need to fix all these other people, thinking about what can I change? And that's myself. The courage to change the things I can. And she talked about in the podcast episode that a lot of times trying to control other things or trying to fix other things is a form of anxiety. And we're just kind of nervous and to look at ourselves. And so it's having the courage to look at ourselves more. So I'm going to embrace my ability to respond. And I'm going to kind of lean in. So what I want to do, maybe I can make some new friends who I don't feel the need to change. Maybe I can pursue the career change. Maybe I can learn about my own negative patterns and work to change them. Maybe I can speak up, say the thing I'm afraid to say. Maybe I can choose relationships of mutual respect that value hard conversations and responsibility. I can communicate my needs. I can be the friend or partner I wish I had. Or in this case of this metaphor with the weather, I can bring an umbrella and some fun boots. And this is where there's just so many types of relationships. Like if you're in an abusive relationship, then speaking metaphorically for the weather, that's like a hurricane. It's dangerous and you should get out. So you shouldn't just bring an umbrella and some fun boots. But, if we're talking about a superficial example, like her son's prom date didn't want a corsage, she did want to make a corsage, just get yourself a margarita and just have fun at your son's prom and take some photos or something. Like just make fun out, like have a fun experience instead of trying to like control people. So it's letting me choose, how do I want to respond? Okay, my family has all these political conversations that I do not enjoy. I've tried to educate them. I thought that if it was just for more knowledge, if I could just educate them, then they would see my way. They just haven't heard the things I've heard. No, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. It's not for lack of education. You probably just have different values. That's just what it is. They've heard the same things you've heard. They just have different values. And it's no point having these Groundhog Day conversations. So you let them have their political beliefs. You tried, okay? And then you choose, what am I going to do instead? How am I going to protect my peace? Some people, it's like, okay, I'll vote and we'll just call that a day. Some people are like, I'm actually going to run for office. Some people are like, I'm going to protect my peace and I'm not going to watch the news. I'll vote and I'll things that actually make an impact, but I'm not going to engage with stuff that just riles me up. So it's just all these different ways where you just let people be themselves, even though you think that it's not good, but just let them do their thing. As long as it's not dangerous or discriminatory, you just let them do their thing. And then following serenity prayer and the wisdom to know the difference, to know what can you change and what can you not change. You cannot change the past or other people's actions. You can change your actions, your words, your circle of friends, your career, your hobbies, your reactions, your habits, your goals, your ambitions. And so focusing your energy more here, this internal locus of control. And I want to give a caveat, you can't change people, but you can choose to be in relationships with people who value growth. And growth is a form of change. You should be, that's a high value of mine, is growth. Two people who are both coming together, who are committed to compromise and to change. And so you can't change people, especially people who don't value change, but you can choose to be in relationships with people who do value changing and growing. So this is at the last chapter, there was a good section that I wanted to read. I would say the first 2 chapters and the last chapter are pretty good. Everything in the middle, I thought was just very redundant and not very good. But she says, ask yourself, and I mean really ask yourself, if all the energy and time you spent resisting reality, wanting lines to move faster, wanting people to text you back, wanting your boss to recognize your worth, wanting more friends, wanting people to like you, wanting your family to support your career change, if all those thoughts, feelings, and precious moments in your day were put towards something that truly mattered to you, where would you be? Who would you be? What would you have achieved? That is the cost of not using let them. Now think about all the missed opportunities, the people you wished you had introduced yourself to, the career you wanted to pursue, the music, the stand-up, the book you never wrote, the photo you never posted, the trip you didn't plan, the thing you were afraid to say, the person you were afraid to love. That is the cost of not using let me. And that's the whole point of the Serenity Prayer. It's like, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life. To learn to mind your own business if you need to, control what you can control, and let go of what you cannot control and put yourself in a better situation. So something that wasn't really talked about in this book that I wish was talked about, and I'll put a better graphic on the screen in editing, but it's the difference between dependence, codependence, independence, and interdependence. Because in my opinion, this book advocates for a level of hyper independence that I don't value in relationships. Now, if you're in a codependent relationship, this would be a great book to just remove some enmeshment from the other person. But I think if people apply it literally, she said that she has seen lots of people are lonely after this. And that's because I think the book doesn't do a good enough job explaining interdependence and how we should lean on each other a little bit. We should communicate. We should lean into difficult conversations. We should compromise. We should be open to dialogue. And even though you cannot change people, you want to be in relationships with people who are open to being influenced. And it's something that's just not dove into in the book, and I think it's a really big, it's a critical thing. So it goes through like respect, reciprocity, autonomy, boundaries, communication, responsibility, and support. So in codependence, you respect the other person at the expense of your own personal autonomy. In a codependent relationship, the reciprocity is one person gives while the other takes. Autonomy is based on another. There are non-existent or blurred boundaries. The communication is manipulative or passive-aggressive. One person takes all the responsibilities. One party is overly reliant on the other. And so if you're in that type of codependent relationship, that's what this book would be good for. But I think it might encourage people to be way too independent. Not enough respect for others, little to no mutual exchange, autonomy at the expense of others, strong but rigid boundaries, reluctance to communicate personal matters, taking responsibilities without seeking help. This is a big thing that I think a lot of people don't ask for help, and I think it's something that's kind of encouraged in our societies to not ask for help, but I think that's something that we actually need to do. And rarely seeking support. So it's getting to the point where you're very independent, you can stand on your own 2 feet, but then like she says at the beginning of the book, that it can lead to withdrawal, it can lead to loneliness. And so you want to make sure that it's not just you're leaving bad relationships and being very independent, but you are leaning in and engaging in relationships that are actually fulfilling you. So you want to get to the point where in an interdependent relationship, reciprocity is there's a balanced give and take, which means you're compromising. You're willing to be changed. Both people are willing to be changed. Both individuals maintain autonomy, clear but flexible boundaries. So it's like you have certain boundaries that are clear, and then there are certain things where you let it go sometimes. If it's not that big a deal, it's not that big of a deal. But if it is a big deal, you have a clear boundary. You have open and honest dialogue, shared responsibilities, and you offer support and seek support when you need it. So if you struggle with controlling things in superficial relationships and in superficial matters, I think this book is helpful. But if you are married and you're having strong relationship problems, I think seeing a counselor is what would be best. For just general everyday marriage things, I think attachment styles are the number one thing that has helped me being married. Garrett and I used to have a lot of Groundhog Day conversations. And when we both learned about attachment styles and when we were both committed to working and healing our attachment styles, that's when our relationship got a lot better. And now we do not have any of these Groundhog Day conversations anymore, but we used to have tons of these Groundhog Day conversations where you're having the same thing over and over again. And so when you get into that Groundhog Day conversation, you got to make some change. And you can start by just having some leadership in yourself by saying, you know what, we got to go to counseling. Garrett and I were in counseling together for a while and also read about attachment styles, and that's something that really helped us. So if you're dating someone who doesn't want commitment and you do want commitment, let them not want commitment, and then let you go find someone who does want commitment. There's no need dating potential, or you think, oh, that'd be great if we were together and if they wanted commitment. Just don't date potential. Let them go ahead and do what they want to do. If your family has annoying political beliefs and you've had Groundhog Day conversations, you try to change them, you know what? Just let them. By having arguments about it, you probably further entrenched their beliefs, and now they probably just believe that thing you don't want them to believe even more. So just let them have their beliefs. Don't try to change them, and then let you decide what you want to do. Do you want to go vote? Do you want to get involved politically? Do you, what do you want to do to protect your peace? If your kid forgets to bring their report to school, let them forget it. By not stepping in and rescuing them, you're letting them gain some resilience and some competency in a safe environment. Better they learn that lesson when they're in 5th grade than when they're 25 and they could get fired from their job. So let them develop some resiliency. Now, when I was looking at some people's experiences, I saw an example where someone said that their husband was staying up till 3 a.m. every day playing video games, and they were supposed to get up and take care of the kids in the morning. That's how they'd kind of delegated responsibilities, that the husband gets the kids up in the morning, but then they kept sleeping through their alarm, and then the kids weren't being taken care of, and then the wife would then go in and fix it. So in that instance, because it's taking care of the children, to me, that's a significant red flag that's demonstrating a lack of care for the children. So that's something that I would seek counseling about. That's something like, there are certain issues where if you're not sure if it's a deal breaker or not, or if it's, it's significant, there's children involved, I would see a counselor about things like that. Don't just let them not take care of the kids. There are certain things that are significant enough that you should not just let slide, that they are so big that I think it would be a disservice to like people reading the book and people who have really significant relationship issues beyond just, I don't know if I should be a Karen or not and let this lady not pick up her dog's poop. Like, there are real significant issues that I think it would have been better in this book if those had been addressed. And so if it's a significant issue, I would see counseling over it. I think that was not said enough in the book. It was not really addressed at all. And so that's something I really think that you should do. If you are experiencing, it's like a superficial relationship with a distant family member, it's a superficial issue, a lady picking up her dog's poop, then you can just let it go. Let them. So thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.